you're basically saying that Jesus is God because a book says he's God. The argument for miracles is defeasible because testimony, it's more likely that the testimony is false than an actual miracle occurred. So my problem is Jesus, if he existed, was the greatest man who ever lived, but to call him God, you can't back that up by saying, look at this 2,000-year-old book.
Okay, but if this man who is so great, who lived such a life of compassion and forgiveness, claims to be God in human form, what do you do with that?
I take it with a grain of salt.
And then after you've taken it with a grain of salt, what does that mean practically?
Look, if I met Jesus and I saw him rise from the dead, then we would be talking about the possibility that he was God. But if I followed someone who was morally perfect and they told me I'm God and I'm going to rise from the dead, I'd say, that's fine, I'll believe you when I see it. Otherwise, you're the greatest man I've ever met and you've got something wrong also. There's something not up here right. Until I see it, how can I believe him? He might have fulfilled every moral promise.
So do you really believe that? Unless I can see it, I cannot believe it. Is that what you really believe?
Well, you got me there. No.
Good. Okay, so shouldn't you be open to the possibility that human beings can at times speak the truth? So can't you be open to the possibility that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and Paul and Peter, when they talked about having seen Jesus Christ risen from the dead, that possibly they were speaking the truth?
Yes, but to say it's possible is not to say it's true.
Okay, good. So then, if it's possible that Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Peter, James, Paul were speaking the truth when they insisted that Christ rose from the dead, don't you think it would be wise to go back and study their documents very carefully to ascertain whether they were lying or whether they were speaking the truth?
Yeah, but the problem lies in the credibility of those documents. So
good.
A lot of questions.
Okay, good. So you start. What's your first question about the credibility of the document?
Who wrote it? What was their motive? Who did they know? What were they trying to achieve?
Oh, good question. Great question.
Probably more pertinent.
The guys who wrote it had no upside perk. The guys who wrote it were persecuted. They were martyred for their belief in Jesus. They died for it. Matthew, John were martyred. Peter was crucified upside down. Paul was beheaded. Not good perks. And yet they insisted that they had seen Jesus risen from the dead, that he was Lord. So I think the motive is pretty clear. They were convinced that he was the truth. And they died not for political power. They died not for financial gain. They died for the one they were convinced was reliable and true.
And that's true, but so did Nazis for Hitler.
Now here's the difference. The difference is the Nazis died for a philosophy. Matthew, John, Peter, Thomas died for what they claimed to have seen.
But what makes
the dead Christ risen from the dead, which means they either died for what they knew to be a lie. And if you study psychology, you will find out people do not die for what they know to be a lie. People will die for a lie, convinced it's the truth. But if these guys make up and fabricate this resurrection of Christ, they know very well Christ didn't rise from the dead. They fabricated this. They would not, sir, be willing to die for their lie. People don't do that. Just look at Watergate. Dean, Ehrlichman, and Haldeman, three brilliant American lawyers, lied about the Watergate scandal. Finally, when the pressure was on, and the evidence was the Watergate scandal really did occur, they all cracked. They were not willing to go through a few years of prison to cover up what they knew to be a lie. How much more unlikely for a group of first century guys to create and fabricate this lie that Jesus had risen from the dead and they'd seen him, and then be willing to die for it?
Well, to presuppose they manufactured it's not what I'm saying. They might have really thought they saw it. I mean, it's just a matter of, like, someone who takes acid thinks they saw a lot of things they didn't see. I'm not saying they would have manufactured it to where motive's the question, right? It's a question of, did they see what actually happened, or were they deluded?
I understand. Okay, and then this is why you got to go to the source document. The reason you got to go to the source document is because of what you just said. Maybe they just hallucinated. Maybe they fabricated. So what you got to do is you got to go to the source document. Now listen to this resurrection account also in Luke. While they were still, this is the disciples, talking about this, which the women had reported that Jesus had risen, Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." They were startled and frightened, thinking they saw a ghost. They didn't conclude, "Oh, welcome back from the dead, Jesus." No, they thought they were hallucinating, just like you said. They thought this was a ghost of some type of apparition. He said to them, "Why are you troubled, and why do doubts rise in your minds? Look at my hands and my feet. It is I myself. Touch me and see. A ghost does not have flesh and bones, as you see I have." See, your question is very reasonable. It's exactly what the disciples questioned when they saw Jesus risen. Oh no! What was in our drink? Oh no! What's happening to us psychologically? And he deals with it and says, "Come on guys, give me something to eat and drink. Come on guys, grab hold of me and see. A spirit does not have flesh and bone the way you see I have." See, so your doubts, your questions are totally understandable, totally reasonable. It's exactly what the first century disciples struggled with. It makes sense.